Hello, welcome to episode 8 of the Web and Git course. Today, we are going to finish half of the index page, which is the top half. So the top half is what we call a carousel. So when you click on the left and right arrows, it will turn into a different picture and then cycles back. And if you leave it there, it's going to switch the picture after a certain period of time. So you guessed it, today we are going to achieve this using Bootstrap. So we look into the docs and scroll to the part that is under components and then carousel. Alternatively, if you don't want to scroll over there every time and you're sure what you need, you just have to search in the search box. And now you're in the carousel page without having to scroll on the left hand side. So actually using a Bootstrap component isn't as daunting as it seems. You just have to scroll over the examples and find one that suits you the most. So looking at the sample website, that there are some text down in the bottom, I think this is the closest one we can get. So let's use this as our reference. So let's open index.pug, that is where we put the carousel. And we copy it but translate it into Pug, because we are writing in Pug while all Bootstrap documentation are in HTML. So we could remove what we have in the index page and we start copying. So we first have a div with an ID and also a class carousel and slide, and also we have data-bs ride false. So first, because this is a div tag, we don't have to explicitly write div in our Pug because the default tag is div. So we can start with the ID, and for all IDs we prepend it with a hash. So hash carousel example captions. And then for all classes we prepend with a dot. So dot carousel corresponding to the first class and dot slide corresponding to the second class here. So after that we enclose all attributes with a pair of parentheses at the end like this. So within the div tag we got another div tag with class carousel -indicators. And then 3 buttons. Button is not the default tag, so we need to add the tag button as the tag name. And then let's look at whether we have any classes and IDs. Yep, we have the active class. So we're gonna do dot active and scroll over. Okay, there are no other classes and IDs. So we copy all attributes it has and copy it and surround it with a set of parentheses. So remember we have added the class active already, so we're gonna delete it from the attributes. It's because we added class equals active as a shorthand right here. This is something convenient provided by pug.js. So we're gonna indent it because the button is inside the carousel indicators. So we look at the other 2 buttons. They are very similar except they don't have this active class and also area current equals true. So we're gonna copy the first button and paste it and remove area current true and data bs slide to 1 and area label slide 2. And also we remove the class active and then we copy the second button and copy it as the third button. So we slide 3 and data bs slide to 2. Alright, so we have successfully copied the first 3 buttons. This is the end of the carousel indicators. So we indent out and we start another div that is carousel-inner. And then what's inside is the image. So img with classes d-block and also w-100. And then source. Source is the source of the image. So we are getting the image from, let's see, we are getting it from images. And then alright, so we don't have the images for the carousels. You can download the images for this project from the Google Drive link in the description if you haven't already. So I'm gonna do it right now. Alright, so what I'm going to add is carousel0.png. So we're gonna do images, and inside the images folder, carousel0.png. And yeah, I missed something. Before the image tag, it is another divider tag with class carousel item. and the class active. And the image tag should be inside this div. And then it is another div tag with classes carousel option, caption, and d-none and d-md block. So after this, we're gonna have an h5 tag saying the first line label, and for our case, the label should be. It is not necessary to understand everything we copy, but I will point out some crucial things you need to understand. So one thing you need to understand is .d-none and .md block. What it means is that this label is hidden when it is an XS screen because it doesn't have the screen size attribute here, and also for small screens. However, it will show the label when it is MD screen or above. So right now, if I want to copy the label, however, it is too small, so we're gonna extend it until it is an MD screen, and you can see the label appears. So we copy the label, and there should be a P tag down there. Okay, and then we're gonna copy this carousel item 2 more times because we have 3 total carousel items. Please note the indentation. Another thing I want you to take note of is the active class. Note that there can only be one active class corresponding to the active component being shown in the carousel. So for the second item and the third item, it should be deleted. And the same for the button, there should only be one active button at a time. So for the label for the second slide, it is only maybe an H5 tag, not too sure. We'll confirm later. And I think similar for the last one. And for the picture, we're gonna use carousel 1 and carousel 2 respectively. And we can open our index.html under the docs folder. And you can see the carousel is here already. So the first picture, the second picture, and the third picture. Yeah, but the arrows are missing. That is because we haven't completed the whole carousel. I advise you to try to pause the video and try to translate it into Pug. Alright, and this should be the correct answer. So when you build the web page, you should see the arrows appear, and they work normally. And now let's fix some minor details of the carousel. So the first detail I would like to fix is this welcome text is quite small. So I'm gonna upgrade this from an H5 tag to an H3 tag, and from the paragraph text to an H5 tag. And it should look larger than before. Yep, and I think it looks okay. And the bold text makes it easier to read. And the next detail is that it is not changing the image on its own after a certain time interval. This is because we have the data BSWrite set to false, and I think we should set it to carousel. And you can see it is now changing the image, I think every 5 seconds by default. And next, I realized that the carousel spans the whole screen instead of aligning to the edge of this page. So this is fixed by adding back the container that surrounds the carousel. Container is another class provided by Bootstrap that guards the content to make sure they never go past the left screen border and the right screen border, so that it looks better and more consistent. So we're gonna add a container and indent everything we have in the index page, and this should fix this issue. And finally, this modification is not about visuals, but for good coding practices. Note that the idea of the carousel is carousel example captions, which is not informative at all. It is better to use a meaningful name, or at least not a default name, so that you won't have any clashes when there are more than one carousel in your website. So we can change this to, let's say, index carousel. However, it is not as easy as this, because there are also some other attributes that we need to change. So carefully, we search for all occurrences of the old ID and replace it with the new ID. And I think this should be it. And it should look the same visually, but it just makes our code a little bit more clearer. Before we end this episode with Git, I would like to add a few words on the code we have just written. Remember, in the middle of the episode, I stated that d-none and d-md-block means that the caption is hidden when the screen size is XS or small, and while it is shown when the screen size is medium or larger. We could of course change that. For example, if we want to change it so that the label shows no matter what screen size it is, we can omit d-none and remove the MD from the MD-block. And I'm just going to do that on the first caption so that you can see the difference. Alright, and now when I refresh the page and I change this into a small screen, and you can see the label is still here, and while for the other two pictures, the label is gone because we haven't changed the behavior. And while on the flip side, you could change that so that maybe the label is too big and you want it to be displayed only when it is a large screen or above. So we could undo our actions and we could change MD to LG. And right now, even if it is a middle screen, we won't show the label. And to demonstrate that, we could enlarge it again. This is a medium screen and the first label isn't showing, but the second and third one are because we haven't changed it. And while when I enlarge it further, this is certainly a large screen and I think the first label is shown. And also, I would like to talk more about the active class. So I think we could open the inspection menu and we should look into the carousel. And we could look closely on these three buttons and also in the carousel inner. Okay, and you can see the active class keeps changing when the picture is being switched. And so this is how the active class works. The first three buttons actually correspond to the bottom three buttons in the carousel. So if it's active, it is going to have a style saying that it should be white in color. And while if it is not active, it is a little bit transparent. And while for the carousel item, whether it is active refers to whether the item should be displayed or not. To prove what I said, we could look at the button and look at its styles. When it is active, it is completely opaque. As you can see, opacity 1. And while if it's not, you can see its opacity is 0.5. And while for the carousel item, when it is active, it is display block, which means it is displaying as usual. And while if it's not, it is display none, which means it is not displaying. The things that I just added just now is more complicated, and I hope by understanding these, you will feel better and the whole lesson is not just about copying. And so it's all done. Easy, isn't it? So finally, we just push our code to GitHub. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.